Hello there BookTube, it's Janet, and I'm just going to bring you up to speed with some of the books I've been reading and a few of the books that I'm currently reading. The first one I'm going to tell you about is The First 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North. A couple of my friends and myself thought, why don't we start our own little book club going, and this was the book that I didn't choose, that one of my friends chose, and we've all three of us ended up DNFing it. I know it was quite a popular book a while back, and I did get to about 150 pages in and I was just so bored. I think, you know, the premise of it is fantastic. Basically, Harry August is one of these special people who live a life, and then when they die they are born again at the same day, the same time, and they can repeat that life in history, but what they can do is choose different paths. So, but they also have awareness of the previous lives. So I was really drawn into the premise of it, but I just found it so slow ploddy, big chunks of text all about like the physics of things, and I was so completely bored and turned off. And then I thought, to be honest, I've got so many other books that I'd rather be reading, so it was a DNF from me. The next book I read was The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kirsten White. I think this was in my Whimsify book subscription box, and I really enjoyed this. This follows the story of Frankenstein, but from the perspective of Elizabeth, who is taken in as a youngster by the Frankenstein family as a companion to Victor because he's a little bit odd, and she quickly learns from a young age that in order to survive she's got to make herself fit in, because she'd come from basically being a foundling that was being brought up by this harridan of a woman who used to beat her, she knew hunger, that she thought, actually there's no way I'm going to go back to that life, I'm out for myself and I've got to make it happen. So she very quickly realised her purpose in the Frankenstein house and did everything that she could to secure that by endearing herself to Victor, and and through that they grew up together, and she did actually develop a fondness and an affection for him. But it follows Elizabeth as Victor, obviously, as we know in the story, starts to go a little bit off the rails and do some dodgy practices, and she does everything she can to protect him, to cover up for him, to make it all right. And it was very dark. I was quite surprised actually that this is down as a YA book, because I think it could disturb some more sensitive people, because it is quite grisly and dark in places, and there were times when I was just a bit like and I'm not squeamish. If you can look on the cover of it, it's actually fabric, but I think it's made to look like skin that has been stitched really badly. Yeah, so I do recommend it. It's a quick read, a good page turner, very dark, very grisly, but perfect for this time of year. Then I've read a couple of middle grade books that I picked up at the Cheltenham Literary Festival, and the first one is City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab, and I think this is the first in the series, and it's set in Edinburgh, and it follows young Cass, whose family they make documentaries and write books all about ghosts and paranormal, and so they're going over to Edinburgh to start filming a documentary of all the haunted places in Edinburgh. And Cass has a best friend called Jacob, who is actually a ghost, and Jacob can travel with her, so he comes over to the UK with her, and then she starts to appreciate that Edinburgh is quite a haunted place, and that the book goes to a lot of the famous landmarks, like Mary King's Close and Greyfriars Cemetery, and just is very evocative of the city of Edinburgh, and it's one of the places that I love. She meets another girl who's like her, who sort of explains the role of people like Cass who can see these ghosts and what they should be doing. There's a little bit of drama. I think the evil ghost is called the Red Raven, if I remember rightly, and she's up to no good, and so they're on a bit of a quest to stop her doing her evil deeds. And it was great. It was obviously middle grade. I think it would scare some of the middle grade readers. It is quite spooky and evocative and, you know, very atmospheric, but I really enjoyed it. I particularly enjoyed all the scenes of Edinburgh because, like I say, I'd been to every place that was referenced in the book, and yeah, she did a really good job, so I think it's going to be a really good series. The next one I read was The Last Chance Hotel by Nikki Thornton, and I'm not sure if this is going to be the first in a series, but I think it does set it up for a series, and this follows Seth, who is basically the kitchen boy in the Last Chance Hotel, and his employers are absolute swines. They are completely abusive of him. He basically does all the work, he does all the cooking, he does all the cleaning, he runs around after all the guests. The daughter Tiffany is a bloody nightmare, and there is this convention that's coming to the Last Chance Hotel, and it's all about the magicians, and the guy who is the head of this magician council is found murdered, and Seth is the main culprit. And so it's sort of like a magical mystery, spooky old hotel whodunit. And to be honest, I didn't spot the person who'd done it, so it kept me guessing right up to the end. It was really well done. I really enjoyed it. I liked all the characters. Well, I didn't like all the characters in it, but I thought the characters were really well drawn. I loved Seth, and what I particularly loved is his cat, Nightshade, who is more than just a cat. And yeah, so I do recommend it. It was a great read. I think if I had got this as a 9-year-old, I would have absolutely devoured it and gobbled it up. It is well worth a read. I am currently halfway through The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I previously read We've Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, which I absolutely loved. It's a bit slow and ploddy up to this point. It's set in a lot of the scene. There's all these characters who've been called to this notorious haunted hill house, because it's by this professor who wants to do a study into the paranormal. So I think the next half is going to be things are going to start happening, because not really much has happened yet, but it's beautifully written. And I'm also reading The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner. The narrative is a little bit all over the place at points. You get the protagonist's story from as she's being transported from one prison to another prison, and you get flashbacks of her life before and what potentially has led up to her being in prison. It's one of those books that is so beautifully written that you actually feel quite soiled. I feel quite soiled as I'm reading it, because the way she describes the grubby, grimy conditions, the complete disregard for humanity that the prison guards act towards the prisoners, the awful life that she's had that led up to her getting into prison. I mean, you can see why she's ended up where she's been. She's had no breaks in her life whatsoever. So yeah, I'm quite keen to see where it goes. We're sort of left up in the air at the moment. I'm only a little bit of the way through. We're only sort of like 3 days into it, but it's a good read so far. And for me, I'm not the world's biggest fan of literary fiction, but I'm finding that it is quite a good page turner. Things are happening. So that's where I'm up to with what I've read recently and what I'm currently reading. Let me know if you've read any of these, and we'll chat in the comments down below. And I will see you all soon, BookTube. Keep reading. Bye!